I recently released a video titled How the Moon Debunks Heliocentrism and the Fake New World Order AE Map a Model of a Plain Earth, Phuket Word Exposed. In that video, I presented 6 heliocentric debunks and 7 fake flat earth PSYOP debunks. Each one of the debunks were complete and total model killers. The video would have been too long if I had explained the only working model of Earth in it, so that is what this video is for. What I am going to do is walk you through the last 5 years of research of the Limitless channel and myself. You will see how the map and model were discovered. You will learn how the map and model work. And I will also address the attempted debunks of it. The Limitless channel and myself met a little over 5 years ago.
We're here today on a Wednesday evening to discuss flat Earth, holographic thoughts, and simulation theory. I'm just going to introduce the producer of the Awake Souls channel, Jason. Really nice to have you on the channel.
Well, thanks for having me. This is my first time doing a hangout, and I'm excited.
Because we both had figured out that heliocentrism is a Jesuit PSYOP, and we both had figured out that the Freemason New World Order AE Map a Model was a PSYOP as well. When both of us went to model the flying pancake ice-walled snow globe, it became immediately clear that it was impossible. That is how we met. We were both flat Earth content creators, but we both spoke out about the impossibility of the circular Earth model. We had a live hangout together and found out that we not only had flat Earth and the knowledge that the popular Freemason New World Order AE Map and Model was a PSYOP in common, but we discovered that we had Christianity in common, and we have been working together on exposing the false dichotomy of the globe versus the fake flat Earth ever since. The first thing we wanted to do is find what the working map and model of Earth is. We racked our minds for about a month looking for any possible variation of a map of Earth that would work as a flat map, but did not have the debunkable flaws that the azimuthal equidistant projection had. One of the things we knew that we were looking for is two polar rotations. Now, if you are not familiar with what that means, it means that if you point a camera at a star called Polaris, which is only visible north of the equator, when you do a time-lapse, you will clearly see that the rest of the stars are rotating around it counterclockwise. And if you are south of the equator and take a time-lapse with your camera pointed at Sigma Octantis, you will see the stars rotate clockwise around a little empty space where there is no star. These are polar rotations, and Earth has 2. That alone excludes all circular maps. Circles have only one pole. In the Freemason New World Order AE Map a Model, they have the sun, moon, and stars doing circles around one polar point. Circles have only one pole. In the Freemason New World Order AE Map a Model, they have the sun, moon, and stars doing circles around one polar point. Polaris, all celestial rotations south of the equator must be ignored. In the search for a map that could support two polar rotations, all of a sudden the word stereographic appeared in my mind. I thought to myself, stereo is 2 channels. Could a stereographic map have 2 polar points? Well, it turns out that is exactly what they have. The only problem was that what I found from my search results online for stereographic maps was a dismal selection of highly distorted maps and a bunch that were not even stereographic maps but were passed off as such. What I did spot was the opportunity for 2 polar points on a flat map. and I told the Limitless channel the map has to be stereographic. He had already downloaded every map of Earth he could find, and he started sending me the stereographic ones. It did not take long, and he sent me the C.S. Pierce 1894 oblique Mercator. At first glance, it was the best of all of the stereographic maps I had seen at representing the known landmasses of Earth in roughly the recognized shapes, sizes, and distances and orientations to each other, but what looked like a possible 3 polar points was confusing. After closer examination, I came to realize that it's still just 2 polar points and not 3. The lines mark out 15 degrees of latitude and longitude, and if you count the lines of longitude coming into the North Polar Point, you will see that there are 24. Those are the 24 time zones of 15 degrees each. Each south polar point receives 12 lines of longitude, so what we are looking at is 1 polar point split in half at the border of the map. This right here is where most people would give up on this map, but I was in a unique position to be able to understand its potential. You see, even before I had heard of Flat Earth, I had already come to the realization that I was in a virtual reality/simulated world. My path took me through a spiritual journey that led me through non-duality in a search for enlightenment. My personal experience was that when duality is removed as a filter that we see the world through, the true nature of our reality shines through, and you can see that everything is doing and being exactly what it was designed to do, and that choices are made and programs run. I could see with certainty that this is a virtual world that we are participants of. But sharing that knowledge with others was near impossible because most people are not interested in figuring out how duality is a hoax. So I was a person that knew I was in a virtual world but still conceptualized the world through heliocentric thinking, imagining spinning on a ball flying through infinite space. Having found out that Earth is a plane, not a planet, my understanding of being in a virtual world all of a sudden made much more sense. Although the model that was presented did throw me for a loop. Because that model requires a dome, it made Earth physical again in a way that was confusing for me. I kept asking myself what would be the point of creating a domed container for the world inside of virtual reality, and could never come up with a satisfactory answer for myself. That is why the moment I realized I was looking at a map of Earth that has 2 polar points and that the boundaries had to loop, that it made the most amount of sense to be the map of Earth. We shared the C.S. Pierce 1894 map for a little while, and a subscriber put us on to the Hotine oblique Mercator stereographic map. The Hotine is the most accurate stereographic map we have come across, and you can see that it's still very similar to the 1894 map, but looks much better in color with the familiar vegetation texture we've all become accustomed to. Now, the maker of this map sets it at a very odd orientation, which is how they're able to hide it in plain sight. You have to first be familiar with the C.S. Pierce 1894 map to understand how to reorient this map. By turning it like this, and making the prime meridian this line of longitude that goes through Greenwich, England, we turn that so it's our center line and make sure that it's set to 0 degrees. Then all we have to do is slice down the 0 and 180 degree longitudes through Antarctica and take this half and put it on the other side. Now the Hotine is set to the same orientation as the C.S. Peirce 1894 map. There used to be some different variations of the Hotine, and we have a version that we've been using that I feel is the highest quality we could find online, although it can't be found anymore. The prime meridian has been highlighted green, the tropics of Cancer and Capricorn in yellow, the equator in red, and believe it or not, the boundaries are the international dateline. We have 24 lines of longitude coming together at the North Pole and 12 lines of longitude coming into the South Pole from the east and 12 from the west. At the equator, there is a top-down view of sunrise through sunset for a day on the equinox at the equator. This shows the sun about ready to rise at the international dateline in the east and just setting at the prime meridian. We can put this picture into motion and you can now see how day progresses across the face of Earth. But I want to show you a close-up of these circles of sight. This is where I recorded the videos to be able to animate sunrise across the face of Earth. In this program, you can set your location to anywhere on Earth, any day of the year, any time of the day, and it will show you the position of the sun to the 100th of a degree per second. The interesting thing to note is that it's obviously built off of a flat plane. It has to be. You cannot go from 0 degrees to 90 degrees without altitude adjustments based on latitudes if you're on a sphere, and there are not any. You can drag this marker around to set your location, and this information will let you know where and when you are. We want to look at the path of the sun on the equator on the equinox, so I will use this slider to get ourselves exactly on the equator. The longitude we can set anywhere, so let's take a look at what they experience in Ecuador. We want to see this on an equinox, so let's go to March 2021. Here you can see the sun rising 90 degrees east and it's going to set 270 degrees west, just like it will everywhere else on Earth on the same day. An awesome feature of this program is that it shows the length and direction of shadows as well. You can see that as the sun rises, infinitely long shadows move from the west to the east in a straight line. At solar noon, the observer will cast no shadow in any direction. The sun is 90 degrees overhead on the azimuth and the altitude. This only happens on the equinoxes at the equator. An observer north or south of the equator will experience a 90-degree sunrise and 270-degree sunset, and the shadows will follow a straight line on the ground, but at solar noon their shadows will be cast either to the north or south. The farther north or south, the longer the shadows. We are going to look this over from many different angles. You can see in the data over here every second of every day. At any second, you can see the azimuth and altitude of the sun to the 100th of a degree. We have its rise and set times, minutes of daylight, and the twilight times for civil, nautical, and astronomical. You can see that the sun runs a steady pace around the observer. That pace never changes anywhere, anytime. As soon as the sun is above the horizon, we see the shadows begin infinitely long, traveling from the west to the east in a straight line. We see the zero shadow at solar noon, then the straight line path till they are infinitely long and the sun sets below the horizon. Notice how the path of the sun remains the same speed and distance from the observer even though it's below the horizon. This is where many are going to get tripped up, because it does not take long to realize that the sun must be coming out of the earth and setting into the earth in order for this program to be accurate. So the first thing we did was check to see what the observable evidence was as to whether or not the sun rises from and sets into the earth. The Limitless channel and myself were both already aware of clouds being recorded both in front of and behind the sun, and we knew what the sun looks like rising from or descending into water. I even had a Nikon P900 and had recorded it for myself. So we are going to go through some footage of what it is that we witness when we observe sunrise and sunset at maximum zoom. It is important to get acquainted with the green flash. The disappearing above the horizon. The energetic waves rolling along its edges. The distance it is from the observer. How clouds within your circle of sight can be behind it. Which side of the clouds is being lit, and the shadows that it can cast upward. And if positioned correctly, it can be recorded coming out of the ground as well. You see, what we can actually witness and record validates the path shown by this program that has the sun setting into and rising out of the plane. The rise and set angles of the sun, the azimuth and altitude measurements, the length and direction of shadows. If the sun did not follow this path around the observer, the program could not be accurate, yet it is extremely accurate. Let's move along now and watch this equinox at the equator from overhead. Hopefully you are comprehending the motion of the sun around the observer now, and you will better understand the stereographic map with the equatorial circles of sight showing an entire day as sunrise and sunset move from the east to west. An observer's longitude determines when the sun will rise and set. Now, let's take a look at how latitude affects the path of the sun around the observer. Now let's look at 45 degrees north latitude. The sun still rises 90 degrees east and sets 270 degrees west, but its solar noon altitude is 45 degrees. Taking a look at 45 degrees south latitude, and you can see that just as with the north, the sun is rising 90 degrees east, setting 270 degrees west, and its solar noon altitude reaches 45 degrees. A straight line is traced by the shadows, but they are now longer to the south as they were in the north. Let's take a look at our tropics now. If we go to 23.5 degrees south latitude and move our date to the December solstice, we will see that the farthest south you can go and still experience the sun be 90 degrees overhead is at 23.5 degrees south, which is called the Tropic of Capricorn. If we go to 23.5 degrees north latitude and move our date to the June solstice, we will see that the farthest north that you can go and still experience the sun be 90 degrees overhead is at 23.5 degrees north, which is called the Tropic of Cancer. The sun being 90 degrees overhead always takes place only between these latitudes. Let's demonstrate how this works on the stereographic map. Let's take a look at where there is data from cities in equal latitudes, north and south, on the same longitude. There are not many places like this. I think Cairo, Egypt and Durban, South Africa are probably our best example for this. These locations are at 30 degrees north and south latitude and 31 degrees east longitude. Let's start in the south by Durban, South Africa. To find our solar noon, we move the time slider till we are closest to 0 degrees azimuth, and we can see that on the March equinox the sun is 60 degrees in altitude. That makes sense considering that we're at 30 degrees latitude. In the north by Cairo, Egypt, we now see that solar noon is found by adjusting the time slider to the time closest to the time when the sun is 180 degrees on the azimuth, and that the sun is also 60 degrees in altitude. The rise, set, and elevation angles mirror each other from the north to the south, except that they are phased 6 months apart from each other. What that does is makes the longest day for the north the shortest day for the south, and the shortest day for the north the longest day for the south. And the only time of year that they are the same is at the equinoxes. Let's take a look now at the solstices and see how that affects the rise, set, and elevation angles of the sun. Looking at our 30-degree north location by Cairo, Egypt, we see that by setting the date to the June solstice, the sun is now in its most northerly path. Solar noon takes place just before noon, and the sun's elevation angle is 83.5 degrees. The rise azimuth of the sun is 62.5 degrees, and the set azimuth is 297.5 degrees. The amount of daylight is 14 hours and 5 minutes. Now let's head south and look at this same day. We're going to reposition and look north now, and you can see that the sun is at its most northerly path, which makes it its shortest path. At solar noon, the sun's altitude is 36.5 degrees. The rise and set angles are the same as the North Star. The sun rises at the same 62.5 degrees and sets at the same 297.5 degrees. But now, because the path of the sun is its shortest, because more of the sun's path is below the horizon, the length of the day is 10 hours 13 minutes. Let's do our December solstice now. Here at solar noon, we have the same altitude for the sun that we had in Cairo on the June solstice, 83.5 degrees, a perfect mirror of each other separated by 6 months. But at the December solstice, our rise and set angles are south of east. The sun is rising at 117.5 degrees, well south of east, which is one of the great Freemason New World Order AE Mappa model debunks. And it is setting at 237.5 degrees, which is well south of west. The length of day is 14 hours and 5 minutes, which mirrors the length of day from the Norse June solstice. And finally, the December solstice from 30 degrees north. We will spin around again so that we are looking south. The sun's altitude at solar noon is 36.5 degrees. Just like it was at the June solstice at Durban, South Africa. And just like at 30 degrees south latitude, the sun is rising 117.5 degrees, which is south of east, and setting 237.5 degrees, which is south of west. Another huge fake flat earth PSYOP debunk. The length of daylight is 10 hours and 13 minutes, which is the mirror of Durban, South Africa at the June solstice. There are so many more things I could go into regarding this program. These dotted lines that run the same direction as the sun's path are the 6 gates that Enoch talked about. The dotted lines that look like a lopsided figure 8 is the analemma. We have hundreds of hours going through details like this, but for the purpose of getting you to understand how the map and model works, you should have enough comprehension of the path of the sun around the observer to be able to make more sense of these animations placed on the stereographic map we use. Now, if you wanted to check out the sun's position at any location on Earth, all you have to do is pick a location. We will do this together. Let's pick New Orleans. You can see that it is at the same latitude as Cairo, 30 degrees north. Let's count up from the equator over here, 15 degrees, 30. And it's at a highlighted longitude. Let's count over from the prime meridian to figure this one out. 15, 30, 45, 60, 75, 90. So then we just go to our program, and all we have to do now is adjust the longitude to 90 degrees west, and we are at New Orleans. Now you will have the ability to see what the exact path of the sun around the observer will be for any time or day of the year. The thing that you're going to have to get your head around is that the path of the sun is around the observer from horizon to horizon. Whatever distance you can see to the horizon, the sun cannot be any further from. It is rising from the earth and setting into the earth and traveling around you, wherever you go. We use this program for demonstrating the path of the sun around the observer because it allows you to see the path as an outside observer, which I think really helps a person conceptualize the actual scale involved. And you can see that the scale is limited to the person's circle of sight. I have not found a program like this for the moon though. For the moon we use Stellarium and the website mooncalc.org. Stellarium only gives the first-person view for a person's circle of sight, but it shows us the sun, moon, and stars all at once and is a great tool. Of course, built on a plane, just as is some program we've been looking at. The MoonCalc website gives a top-down view of the moon's path and can be used much like the sun's program we've been using. You just cannot swivel around and see the moon's path around an observer from side views. They show the path from a strictly top-down view. With these tools, we can demonstrate how all the sky features work in this world. They are all very precise and built off of flat planes. So when we are asked where the proof and data is for our model, we always point them to these sources. The next thing I'd like to address is traveling across the boundaries of the map. So far, we've been looking at things that we can prove with tangible evidence. With movement across the boundaries, I can show you how it works in a virtual reality, but there is no way to record and prove what is taking place. So let me show you how this works. If you have an observer that is going to travel across one of the boundaries, their circle of sight is moving towards the boundary and eventually will begin crossing and coming out the other side at the same latitude. The boundary is not a tangible physical wall. It is the border of physicality itself. Seamless re-entry into the world at the other side is what we expect and is often referred to as looping or wrapping around. In fact, the first commercial video game, Asteroids, demonstrated how to understand this concept in 1979. The map is almost all water, so the only way you're going to cross those parts of the boundary is by ship or airplane. Antarctica is the only landmass that allows traversing the boundary across land. What is interesting is that when you look at maps of Antarctica, that it's divided into West and East Antarctica as well. They even have them labeled correctly. What could we predict by looking at this map and model that we would be able to test as far as traversing from one side of the map to the other if we were crossing Antarctica? Well, we would expect that when we crossed 180 degrees longitude either direction, that compasses would flip. While I've never been to Antarctica to test this for myself, I do know that magnetic declination maps show a 180 degree flip right where it's expected. The only thing that changes when you cross the boundaries is that you need to adjust your time one day ahead or behind depending on the direction you are traveling.
Here's the only place I know of where you get a second chance in life. The International Dateline. Cross it, and you get to spend yesterday all over again.
If you are flying from Honolulu to Sydney, the flight time is roughly 10 hours and 50 minutes. A flight departing at 1 p.m. arrives in Sydney at almost 8 p.m. the next day. The flight time from Sydney to Honolulu is an hour shorter at 9 hours and 50 minutes, and a flight leaving Sydney at 9:40 p.m. arrives at 11:30 a.m. the same day. You can see why this is the case by placing two of these maps side by side, so that you can see sunrise coming towards you as you are heading west. The plane is traveling roughly 500 miles per hour, depending on if they are riding a jet stream or fighting one, so it is traveling at roughly half the speed of the sun. So when we take off from Sydney and head to Honolulu in a straight path, we are doing what is called dead reckoning. Because heliocentrists have converted the stereographic map to a sphere and then made projections from a sphere, navigators have to use room lines on their maps to dead reckon, whereas they are straight lines and the most direct route on a stereographic map. So here we are crossing the border and we see how sunrise is moving towards us. and as soon as we cross the border, we have now entered the previous day. Having the two maps side by side is just to show you the continuity of sunrise and sunset. You actually have to be wrapping around and coming out through the side border at the same latitude that you left from. There is not a new world for every day. So here we come into Honolulu, and it actually now makes sense how you could land before you took off even though you were flying for nearly 10 hours. Let's turn around and head back to Sydney now. Solar noon is still traveling away from us even though we are also traveling west, because you are traveling at half the sun's speed. We wrap around our border, but as we come out, we are coming into the next day that has already begun for those in the east. Almost 11 hours of flight, and we are landing at 8 p.m. the next day. So we are talking 1 p.m. to 1 p.m. plus another 7 hours, so your watch makes it appear that you've been in the air for 31 hours. But it all makes sense in a virtual world where once you cross the border, you are now in a part of the world that has already experienced its next sunrise when you get there. When we were traveling from Sydney to Honolulu, we left before the day had ended in the east, and when we went across the border, we came into the same day that we had left. With a flight time of less than 12 hours, we actually arrived in Honolulu before we left Sydney. I know that's a bit of a mind bender, but it's a fun one to finally figure out because it can help you get rid of jet lag. Another thing you need to understand is that the stereographic map is not equidistant. Some people have come along and thought that they have debunked the stereographic map by creating a ruler for a known distance like LA to New York and then comparing that ruler to other places on the map. All that they have demonstrated is that they do not know how to measure distance on a stereographic map. It is not equidistant, so no scale can be applied. It does not mean that you cannot measure though. The boundaries of all of the land have been plotted based on their latitude and longitude. That is the reason the land masses look the way they do. Every place is at its exact latitude and longitude. That means that is what we must use to measure with, its latitude and longitude. Using these measurements, we get the exact distance between two locations in nautical miles. Nautical miles is the original determination of distance, and it was defined as the distance traveled in 1 arc minute. A statute mile is 86.9% of a nautical mile, and a kilometer is 54% of a nautical mile. So all you have to do on a stereographic map is determine the latitude and longitude for any two locations, and now we have calculators that do all the math for us. Put in your coordinates and it'll tell you your exact distance in nautical miles. Then all you have to do is convert it to whichever system you prefer. So it's not that the scale is off in the stereographic map that we share. There is no scale. It is a coordinate system, and the coordinate system itself defines the distance between two locations. It may be difficult to get what being a coordinate system truly means at first, but as you contemplate everything in the map being at its exact latitude and longitude, you will begin realizing that you are now seeing the true shape of Earth, and not the distorted view we're familiar with from a globe. So that takes me to the last thing that I'm going to cover regarding the map and model in this video. I feel like what we have covered in this video is enough for most people to comprehend how a stereographic virtual reality works now. Over the course of the last 5 years, the Limitless channel and myself have hundreds of hours of content going into all the details of this model that we can gather from the actual witnessable, observable data. What I have shown you is the best, most condensed version I can, and now you know the debunks of the people that say they have debunked the map and model. The only two things that they've been able to come up with is that it is not to scale, and they say travel across the boundaries in a physical world is impossible. And the answers to that are stereographic maps are coordinate systems, and we are in a virtual reality.
But it's just a sweet, sweet fantasy, baby. When I close my eyes, you come and take me. It's so deep in my daydreams, but it's just a sweet, sweet fantasy, baby.
So what I want to finish up on is why use a stereographic map. You know, what would be the point of using a stereographic map over one that's perfectly gridded out? Well, if you were in a world that is gridded out, it would be obvious that the world is a flat plane, because a grid can only exist as a flat plane. And to have a north and south, you must have two polar points. You cannot have every line of longitude have its own north and south and have it be a valid coordinate system. Locations would not be addressable through the use of compasses. Travel before technology would be impossible in a world designed this way. In a world that all you can use for determining direction is a compass that only has a north and south pole, you cannot have everywhere you travel east and west have its own north and south. Adding two poles to a gridded out map makes it a stereographic map.
So many questions in my
And one pole maps straight do not work. I mean, sure, you could create a circular world, but you would immediately know that you were in a circular flat world. Everyone would know exactly where the center was, and that because there was no southern rotation that you are on a flat circle. It would be self-evident that you had a creator. Any flat world has a creator. No person has ever been able to conceptualize existence on a flat plane that had no creator. With either the gridded out flat plane or the circular flat plane, there would never be any question that you were created. By the creator using a stereographic map, he created a world that was navigable pre-technology in all directions, and he left the door open for people to be able to misconstrue the two polar rotations as evidence for being on a sphere. One of the first things the Limitless channel and myself realized when we understood the stereographic map is that heliocentrism is the strong delusion spoken of in the Bible. Heliocentrism was birthed by pagans like Pythagoras, who was what we now call a Kabbalist. He was actually following the teachings of Canaanism that he learnt from Babylon. Then in the 1600s, Pythagoreanism was revitalized by Jesuits and Freemasons from the Vatican. Heliocentrism has only been spreading since the 1600s, and it wasn't until the moon landing hoax that it was solidified as worldwide doctrine. Up until a couple of hundred years ago, it was still considered heretical to suggest that Earth moves when the Holy Scriptures explicitly state that it is fixed and immovable. So over the course of the last couple of hundred years, the Vatican has been able to indoctrinate the whole world into heliocentrism. Hence the strong delusion. The Catholics sought a way to explain all that exists in the world without there being a creator. The best they were able to conceptualize is that everything came from nothing in a Big Bang. And over the course of billions of years, that life came from non-life, evolving the least complex organisms into the most complex organisms. There is no evidence to support heliocentrist concept for existence without a creator. The strong delusion truly is powerful. Atheism is only possible through heliocentrism. People who want to deny having a creator now have a means of doing so through heliocentrism. Although it's not truly plausible, nor is there any evidence to support it. But that really does not matter to the person that wants something to be a certain way. They can lie, deny, hide from, and misconstrue the truth all they want due to a thing called cognitive dissonance. Believing that everything came from nothing and that you do not have a creator truly is a strong delusion. It has allowed people to act as if there are no consequences for their actions and to show their true colors. The Creator obviously knew that the fallen angels would use a two-pole Earth as a sphere to deny the Creator of this world, and designed the world in a way to test and see who would fall for it and not follow the straight and narrow path of truth. So it is up to you now whether or not you are going to do the research as to which version of reality you're going to follow. There are only three choices. You can go with the Jesuit heliocentric model where everything is made up of spinning balls that came from nothing. You can go with the Freemason New World Order Truman Show snow globe flying through outer space. Or you can go with being in a virtual world created by the Father Yahawah in the Bible, where Adam is the first human, and Christ, whose name was Yahawashai, died a martyr's death to redeem us from Adam's sin. There are only three models of reality, and only one of them works. So there it is, how the stereographic map works in a virtual reality. It really is not complicated, and if you've played a video game before, you should have a leg up on everyone else that has not. That makes it quite simple to grasp. Please like, share, and subscribe if you want to know more about the world we live in. Thanks for tuning in. Till next time.